always like seeing, are you guys
Here you're doing the invocation. So I'm going to lead a moment of silence prior to that to honor the J6ers who died that day, and then I'll give it to you.
Yeah, we're going to set it there. They're going to set it there and just hold it. Yeah, just set the little block that we will be high. So that this
Okay, so flag.
It's a really cool flag. I believe it's great. Well, I like the story. I like it.
That's awesome.
So how are you?
I would like to welcome all of you to the Hess Hacienda. My name is Paul Hess. We're delighted that you're here. We do a number of events here, and we're doing this one on the deck. We got very fortunate on the weather because 2 or 3 hours ago, we weren't sure. So I'm providing the venue. JoAnn, I'm going to turn it over to her shortly. But I want to have you say the Pledge of Allegiance to a 34-star flag, original, carried in the Civil War. Kansas was the 34th state. I'm the 5th generation, and I cannot sell it, and I have to pass it down to one of my kids or my nieces or nephews. And Richard Wallace, 155th Army Regiment, Buffalo, New York, was a flag bearer, and they got shot a lot, and he survived. Which is one of the reasons I'm here. Yeah. So let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand up, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Coming to find out about the truth of J6. We have J6ers here. There are 4 J6ers who died that day who will never be able to speak again or advocate for J6. And their names are Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boylan, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. Those 4 were Trump supporters killed that day. There's also Matthew Perna, who represents all the J6ers who killed themselves because they couldn't withstand the persecution the government hammered on them. So let's just have a moment of silence for those 5, and then we'll hand it over and do an invocation. Thank you.
Let's pray. Bow your heads with me. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you as a nation, and we see what is going across our land, and in many ways we need to humbly repent of the sins there is in the United States of America today. Lord, this nation was founded on biblical principles, and many of the people who came across first were seeking religious freedom. And you granted that to the United States. Lord, I pray that as we remember J6 today, and as we kick off a campaign for office, Lord, that we would remember that Jesus Christ was ultimately the only Savior that we could look to for hope. Lord, you conquered death, and in that resurrection from the dead, Lord, we all can be raised again at the last day and look forward to heaven. Please bless our time tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming. You can be seated. I want to thank, there's so many people to thank, but the video team, they're professionals. And their names are Dana, Joe, and Herschel. And we really appreciate you for coming here and doing this. The rest of you from the 45th District, raise your hand. They're outside working, but they are just amazing helpers and I'm running for the 45th Legislative District, so I really appreciate all of you guys, your volunteer. Thank you, Jerrod, for coming all the way over here. When I ran for school board last year, he sent me a message, and it was so encouraging, just out of nowhere. And I really appreciate that. Your humble willingness to help people. And then, of course, our 3 guys, John, Taylor, and Joe. You'll hear their stories. And I just thank you so much for coming. Glenn, how many of you have taken his Doge class? Okay, so I took it, and it's way too much data gathering and stuff for me, so I said, I'd rather be like a Project Veritas undercover agent. Would you send me out in that way? And do you remember what you said to me?
I don't remember what I said.
You said I'm not ugly enough.
Oh, that's right. That is right. I have a whole theory on how to infiltrate. Yeah, trust me. Yeah.
But I'm only hair and makeup away from ugly. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to John Cameron here. He's our J6er guy, or one of them.
Thanks, JoAnn. Is JoAnn not a fireball? Is she not a firebrand? Right? So I want to talk about a couple things. One, this is a J6er town hall. This is open to the public. This is open to liberals and Democrats. If somebody wants to come up and talk about anything with their perception of what they believe happened that day, we open discussion as long as there's no disturbance and it can be done in a kind, respectful, tactful manner, right? This is the first time anything like this has been done anywhere in the United States. Because usually it's not open to the public. That side doesn't want to show up or be nice. So the goal of this venue is to bring forth the CNN narrative of what happened that day, and to have people who were there talk about it and talk about what happened to us and what really happened. So that, yeah.
We have a car that needs to leave that's blocked in. There's a red Tesla and a black Subaru in the straight part of the driveway blocking it.
Okay. Do we get that? Red Subaru, black Tesla?
No,
Red Tesla, black Subaru. Okay.
Hey, Paul, I'm in front of the garage. Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the white.
No, that side.
Okay.
Okay.
It's your side.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously parking was a little bit of a problem, so thank you for suffering through that. Thank you for being here. So the J6 town hall format, this round robin town hall, the questions we want to answer are the questions that you have. Okay? We're going to let you lead the discussion. We have a program and questions that we would bring out talking about election integrity. The underlying cause of J6 was that I went there, they went there, all 5 of us went there because we believed the 2020 election had major irregularity. I'll say stolen, but we can dumb it down to irregularity. That's the underlying cause. Then the true nature of me and why I'm doing this. So I went there that day. It was the first political event of any sort I ever attended. I had never gone to a political rally of any sort. I never knocked on a door. I never helped any candidate do anything. But I lived through the biomedical police state of COVID. And it woke me up to something was not right. Then I watched Seattle burn. And we have to think about this because this is all part of this process. And by the way, we're still dealing with it. The truth is still not out. Then I became activated and became a Trump supporter, although I voted for him before, but I became a vocal Trump supporter, but I thought to myself, I want to be the silent majority. Because heaven forbid I do it publicly, right? There was a 50-year-old man afraid to say that I supported Trump. Why? I would lose all my liberal business from it. My father's liberal would hate me. I would be attacked on social media. So I just did my silent majority. He lost under suspicious fashion. And I got activated. And quickly, I went to J6. And by the way, prior to October of 2020, that day, I was a political atheist. I couldn't have defined Republican, Democrat, liberal, any of that. Didn't care, just wanted to live my life. Does anybody know what happened on October 20th, 2020? Hunter Biden's laptop broke by a Miranda Devine article. Okay? And through this process, it made me realize that the media is lying to us. So I went through this process, and now here I am. I'm the first Washington State resident ever to be sentenced to prison for picketing. My father's stepson reported me to the FBI. I lost my business. My wife divorced me. I've lost everything. But I have God's grace, so I'm good. God works in mysterious ways. I believe that he has put all of us on a path, and God works through other people. And these people are put into my life for a reason. There may be somebody here that is being drawn here for something that I don't know. So as we gather this, it's to bring the truth out, but there's another component that's even more important. And we have JoAnn and Jerrod, who were there that day, did not get arrested. They are a J6 attendee. They came back. And there's 800 times more of this champion than there are of this champions. So it's important when we look to recruiting those people in our conservative organizations, if we can find the cohort of the attendee who's been afraid to raise their hands, we will find a bucket of volunteers that, as opposed to the normal PCO, 80% might be duds. And by the way, I was state committee man of my county last term, so I went through this space. But if you can find that attendee, 80% of the time they're good, and 2 of those people will be champions and will run for office. And will show up to every meeting and do all the work, knock on all the doors, show up at everything. And we have many of those people right here. But if we can find them, we'll have more. And usually when I speak is when they raise their hand and say they went. So we're able to find them. So that's who I am. We'll introduce the others, but I'm going to introduce Glenn Morgan. So Glenn Morgan is part of my J6 story. The FBI knocked on my door. I was activated. I'm like, let's go. I was so new and naive to politics, I didn't know that I could just go to the 25th and knock on doors and make phone calls and wave banners, and the spiritual battle that called us to DC the same way. The battle of good versus evil that got us up out of our chairs and flew across country to do work. That same spiritual battle can be solved by the simple work we can do today and pick up the phone and knock on doors and get initiative signed. So somehow I got in touch with Glenn. Somebody said, hey, I was at a protest, I met this guy. Looked him up, called him, talked to him. Met him with this other organizer friend at a casino in Tenino. And we just had coffee. Then I had him lead a group of 5 people getting organized at a house in Furcrest, Washington. Then the FBI knocked on my door, talked to my wife, and called me before I was arrested. And I was like, I need an attorney, and I don't want a liberal attorney. And I called Glenn, who referred me to my attorney, Angus Lee, out of Vancouver, Washington. If you don't know that name, he's a retired Navy SEAL fighting patriot, and led me down that direction. Since then, obviously, it used to be people think, well, if you go to J6, you got to be a MAGA, diehard, crazy Republican. I had never done anything. That wasn't me. I wasn't like Dana, my film guy, who does everything. So, I am that person now. I've been radicalized. I believe communism is here under the familiar name of the Democratic Party. It might be disguised as democratic socialist, but I have been persecuted to the point, like I said, where I've lost everything. Now, I'm leading this group for a reason. These 2 guys have families. I don't. Lost it. I went from living on the house on the lake to living in my basement renting out rooms, because if I get pinched again, and by the way, we have a government in our state that has put together how do we describe it? It is the Domestic Terrorism Violent Extremism Task Force, led by BLM activists. We also have an attorney general who can perform a warrantless search based on any referral. My attorney has said, just by having this organization of past domestic terrorists, I'm committing conspiracy to commit. But guess what? I have nothing left to lose and everything left to gain. And Glenn has helped me do that. So without further ado, Glenn.
Well, John, I hope they don't come in and arrest you. So I'm not. I'm not purposely setting you up to be arrested. Actually, during the recent hearing when the legislature approved that bill for the Attorney General to give them warrantless, some of my attorneys said I'm probably the first one that they're pulling all the files on. So if anybody's going to get arrested, I imagine it'll be me. Listen, to be here at this event, one of the things I feel like when I meet some of my friends that were there in the Capitol is that there, but by the grace of God go I. I could have easily been in Washington, D.C. that day. I wasn't, just because, honestly, I didn't have enough money for the plane ticket. And I even had a friend offer to drive me out there because they were taking a motorhome across the country. If you remember, people were doing that. And I just didn't think I could take that much time away from my activism here in the state. I could have been right there with you. And after we had organized a variety of rallies at the Capitol earlier during 2024, or during 2020, and we had organized a lot of events. I've been organizing events in the Capitol since 2011, so I was pretty used to doing stuff like that. And, it could have been any one of us. I wouldn't have, if they were waving me into the Capitol, I would have walked inside too, And so there were a lot of things when I talked to some of my friends and several people who are not here today, people who did have SWAT teams at their house, completely ridiculous. Their neighbors sending me photos of what was happening to them. Other people, longtime family friends whose son got arrested and dealt with that drama, and I think they're still dealing with some of the tragedy. But, one thing that I think when we hear media discussions about what happened on J6, I think people fail to put it in the context of what was going on. And if you lived in Washington, you know about Chaz and Chop. Total lawlessness down in Seattle. If you drove up there like I did and filmed just the complete riots as they were breaking all the windows down, burning cars, assaulting people, shoplifting, and with zero consequences. Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who's now our governor, did absolutely nothing and prosecuted nobody. Nobody, not a single person in the state ever got prosecuted for anything that happened. No matter how much violent, even when people died, other than they finally had some justice for some of the young, ironically, BLM protests, right? But who died at Chaz and Chop? It was young black men. And they didn't want to prosecute that. They didn't want to do anything about it. It took civil lawsuits against the city of Seattle. All that context was going on in cities all over America. And normal people felt like they could go and protest in D.C. There's no way that anybody went there thinking that they were going to get arrested that day for protesting in Washington, D.C. Why would you ever think that? The other thing I think to put in context with more of the longer term activists that have been involved, that I knew people that had been in Washington, D.C. for the Tea Party rally back in 2009. If you remember that was one of the largest rallies that's ever been held in Washington, D.C. history. And they videotaped it, and it was amazing how many people showed up and marched down D.C., and it terrified the left at the time. Millions of people came out with groups that nobody had ever heard of before. It wasn't astroturfed, it was real people showing up, and they were upset, and they were angry, and they protested, and they cleaned up all the garbage, and it was the cleanest protest that D.C. had ever had. And I remember watching the videos about that, and I know some of the same people who went there thought they would come back to D.C. again to deal with and confront and petition their government for concerns that they had, just like we have done at protests since for hundreds of years in this country, without arrest, without threat. And it never even dawned on me when I first met JoAnn, when he came back, that he was going to be arrested. It just never dawned on me that would happen, especially since he live streamed his whole experience. And I never could have imagined that. So I think we're going to just start off here. I wasn't there, J6. I was at home. I was organizing other events here. And many of my friends went there, and the experiences that they came back and told me about, it really meant a lot to me. And these are the people that I think we want to hear from today. I'm just here to moderate more.
And has anybody been watching the TV today, the Rededication of America? It's just a worship service, right? That's what it was January 5th. It was amazing. People from all over just worshiping together. The next day was the same thing. I didn't see any violence. At 3 o'clock, there was a text from Trump, go back to your hotels right now. So that's what everybody did. Went back to their hotels, like good citizens. In the subway, my son called, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" It was already on the news. It was already pre-programmed, ready to play. It was pre-recorded. There's no way that live stuff was on the TV that fast. It was insane. So then that made me really mad at the corruption and the media. I'm going to just say why I'm doing this town hall. I played the piano in church today, and I peeked at the pastor when he was praying, and he was reading his prayer. So I feel like it's good enough for me to read my little thing here too. Some people ask why I'm even hosting a January 6th town hall while running for state representative. Well, the answer is simple. Voters deserve honest conversations, even about difficult subjects. When I ran for school board, my opponents, well, I don't know who did it, but they sprayed J6 on my signs. All my campaign signs, they labeled me an insurrectionist in the newspaper instead of actually talking about issues. That experience showed me how quickly political smears replace real dialogue in today's climate. I'm not holding this town hall to glorify chaos or excuse violence. I'm holding it because Americans should be able to ask questions, examine facts, discuss civil liberties, government accountability, media narratives, and the political divisions that continue to affect our country without being shut down or smeared. In a healthy democracy, we don't silence people with labels. We confront issues openly. We listen, we debate, and we let the voters decide for themselves. My campaign is about transparency, accountability, strong schools, safe communities, and giving citizens a voice again. If people disagree with me, bring it on. That's what makes our country great. Disagreement should lead to conversations, not vandalism, intimidation, or character assassination. So this town hall is about restoring respectful civic discussion. That's what I believe representative government should look like, and that's the kind of leadership I intend to bring to Olympia.
Me to go? Yeah. All right, so I'm Taylor Johnatakis. I'm from the other side of the Puget Sound, the nice side, Kingston, Washington. We're the test bed where all the bad ideas go to get tried out before they implement them hardcore in Seattle. And anyways, I like what Glenn said about the summer of 2020 and how we had the summer of love here in the Pacific Northwest. And so when I went to January 6th, it was kind of on a whim. I'm an old political science major, international studies, and I'd done a whole bunch of stuff, but I'd landed myself in the septic industry and found myself oftentimes explaining to other tradesmen exactly why the president's signature makes a difference at the price of the pump. And so when 2020 happened, I started a podcast called The Peasant's Perspective, just to explain how kind of the narrative and things that happen in world politics and federal and even state politics actually does affect the everyday person, and that's why it's so important to vote. That was kind of my shtick. And I had a brother-in-law after the election when Trump said, you know, come to January 6th in D.C., it'll be wild. He was like, hey, let's go. And I hadn't had a chance to see a rally, watched plenty of them on TV, of course, so I thought, hey, this might be the last chance to see Trump speak, and I could get some really cool B-roll footage for my podcast. So I jumped on a plane on the 5th, was there on the morning of the 6th, and like JoAnn said, it was a lot of people praying. I remember there was a sign that says, prayer can save this nation. And it was really a joyous, very warm-filled atmosphere with an impending sense of doom because we weren't so certain the legislature was going to do the right thing. Anyways, long story short, after Trump was done talking, made my way to the Capitol, and I walked up the steps, and I ended up making my stand there, and I ended up pushing a bike rack, which was not a very good decision. And I'm sure we'll talk about more of that later, but they ended up classifying that bike rack as a deadly weapon. So I ended up getting a long story at the end. I ended up getting a 7-year, 3-month sentence and ended up serving 14 months of that before the pardon came down on January 20th, 2025. So I would have not been released until 2030. Combine that with pretrial time and combine that with the 3 years of probation, I would have wrapped 13 years of my life up into the January 6th nonsense. That the FBI told me 50-50 you either get charged and at worst it would be misdemeanor mischief. They were wrong. I also got audited by the IRS in the process. I got put on the no-fly list, and I also got debanked. And it is still difficult for me to open bank accounts. So a lot of that stuff is residual as time goes on. But yeah, that was my general story, and I'm sure I'll share more details. But yeah.
Yeah. So my name's Joe Slab, and I live locally here. And so normal American guy, business owner, small business owner, and married, 5 kids. And you know, my wife and I watched the election, went to bed, and woke up in the morning with very different news. And you know, we'd watched the shenanigans going on in the state for many years. You know, the 2004 Chris Gregoire versus Dino Rossi shenanigans, and so we could pretty clearly see what was going on. And then in the weeks following that, there's a lot of lawsuits. You know, Texas sued a bunch of other states, 17 other states joined in. There's a lot of stuff going on that. So myself, my wife, her 2 sisters, even someone in the crowd here, Janet, we all went back to D.C. for the Jericho March around the Supreme Court, which is 3 weeks before J6. And you know, it was a great event. And we stayed at a hotel there called the Hyatt Place Hotel. And across the street from it, big BLM protests going on. It was like 2 in the morning, they're shooting off fireworks, peace lines, chanting. It was pretty rowdy. You know, Proud Boys were there. And anyway, so 3 weeks later, all these lawsuits were getting kicked out of the court by what I think was, scared judges. And Trump says, hey, let's go to, let's have another rally on January 6th. About 100 congressmen had said that they're going to debate some of these more questionable states in the certification process that day on January 6th. So there was going to be a big debate that day. And Trump said, hey, come make some noise, put some spine in these politicians back, and I'm going to do that. So I asked my wife if she wanted to go, I asked one of my kids if they wanted to go. Different reasons, my wife couldn't go back again, but I had no idea it was going to turn into what it was going to turn into. To be perfectly honest, I might have run the other direction if I didn't know what was going to happen. So go out there. It was a great day. We're all having fun. A lot of grandparents and grandkids were at that event. Trump had a big rally there. We all marched down to the Capitol building afterwards, where they told us to go peacefully. There was no insurrection kind of talk or fight. These were like normal, boring people like myself. We get there, and all the barriers had been down. We didn't even know there was barriers around the Capitol building, but I circle it a couple times and see that huge crowd there. I had videos. I took 98 pictures and videos that day. People were singing the anthem. It was like a beehive, just like the pictures you see. But I didn't personally see fighting or anything like that. Again, I would have gone the other direction if I saw fighting. I circled it. There was a door where, there were actually a lot of doors where people were going in and out. There was one where there were 3 guards there kind of waving and shucking and jiving with people. I got a video of that. Actually, I wanted to show that to my judge later on, and my attorney said, do not show that to them. They don't want to see that. So anyway, I go in there for 13 minutes, 12 minutes, 13 minutes. During that period, Ashley Babbitt is shot. Now, I didn't hear it at the time. I don't think that many people have heard of it. But so I went in at 2:38. Ashley Babbitt was shot at 2:44. And at that point, all the officers in there got really serious. They pulled out their guns and said, you guys need to leave. And we did. But it took about 6 minutes to get out because there's press at the door. You couldn't just walk your way out. It was a crowded place. And, so that was in the afternoon. Again, there were guards standing around, standing post. It was a heavily guarded area. I saw Lisa Desjardins inside the building doing, NPR broadcasts during this period. So it wasn't like a war zone or anything like that. So we hear there's going to be a curfew that night. So everyone had to head back to their hotels. Trump tells everyone to go back to their hotels. I get, I'm eating my pizza in my hotel room. I turn on the TV and my jaw falls on the floor. It's like, oh my goodness, really? And I instantly I know, boom, they're coming after us. This is a political ploy. So long story short, I'm scared. Fly home. It was actually the next day was my birthday. That was one of the reasons I was out there. I wanted to see Trump for probably the last time. We're going to make some protests to try to push back this corruption that we knew was going on. And it was my birthday trip. So fly back, kind of slink, through the airport. Everyone's kind of quiet. We get a call from the FBI, a couple weeks later. One of our neighbors the kids our kids grew up with had called the FBI on me, and long next 4 months they watched our house for 4 months with cameras. We live a very boring life. They ended up swatting our house. They grabbed me. They shut down the whole street where I work up in Everett. Shut down the whole street to grab me, put me in leg irons, took me down to Seattle courthouse, and then about 13 or so cars went down to where we live in Lake Forest Park, raided our house where my wife with all our kids doing homeschooling were, guns out. It's a pretty traumatic situation for my kids. We get put on a no-fly list, and so when we do fly, we can't fly. It's the 4 S's, where they basically put you through the ringer. They do swabs, rip apart your stuff. Takes you 2 to 3 hours just to get on a plane. Yeah, and so anyway, it was basically we're in pre. So they let me out after a day in the can after I'm arraigned, and then from there for another year, it's basically political pretrial probation, where you're doing drug testing, they're watching you. You can't have weapons in the house. You have a probation officer that you got to check in with, all that kind of stuff. Legal wrangling, a lot of money spent on lawyers. Finally, I get sentenced. They wanted to put me in jail. I had spent a lot of money on lawyers to where I didn't actually go back to jail. I had 200 hours of public service, $5,200 in fines, which was very small compared to the legal fees we paid. Travel restrictions, more probation, more checking in every month with people. And then finally we got about a couple days before probation was over, we were back in D.C. for the inauguration. And in fact, again, I was back there with Janet. She's in the back there. And we were on a train, and the pardon came through. And basically the whole train just erupted. People were happy. And they found out that I was a J6er, so they came over, wanted to take selfies. And it was fun. It was traumatic. I wouldn't have signed up for this, obviously. So anyway, that's my story.
This topic needs some peace for those of us who were there. Even for people like JoAnn and I who didn't get arrested, we still lived in a bit of terror for years, wondering when the knock was going to come at our door or something. So thank you for hosting. The water running in the background is just like this soothing, pretty amazing. I do want to tell you about my campaign. I'm leading the polls in Washington's 4th District, which is Central Washington. I've worked for 5 years to get the total dirtbag Dan Newhouse to finally retire. I beat him in the last primary, but I want to save that for the closing later, and I'll tell you about the campaign, and I will beg for money. Is that fair? I also really want to tell you why I'm here, and so please don't let me forget to do that. But first, I think I should just tell you what happened, my experience. And I want to tell you, for starters, I'm very appreciative for everyone who's here, because you are being gaslit like nothing before. The media has done nothing but lie about this for years, and somehow, even though you guys weren't there, it reminds me in the Bible where Jesus tells the disciples, like, yeah, you guys are great, but you got to see me in person. The people who are really going to do amazing things are those who believe that never got to see me. Right? So you guys are kind of in that category where it's like you believe us even though you weren't there. But I'm telling you, we saw it with our own eyes. And it is ridiculous how the media has gaslit this whole thing. And so I'll just tell you, so I arrived on January 4th, and I've been to DC probably 70 plus times in the last 20 years. Used to do a lot of citizens lobbies. I'm a business guy. I'm not a political guy. I kind of got into this in 2015, 2016. I did videos here in Washington State encouraging people with 5 reasons why we need to elect Donald Trump. So I think that got me on some lists already. And then, so I arrived in DC on January 4th with a buddy, and we were staying at the JW, which is basically a block from the White House, and we dropped our stuff and we went outside, and there was this group of people walking towards Lafayette Park, which is just a block behind the White House. And at the time, Lafayette Park was taken over by BLM. And so there was all these police bicyclists that passed us as we were walking up there, and they basically formed a double human wall between us, the protesters, I guess you could say, which were totally peaceful, and then the people that were in the Lafayette Park for BLM. And what I saw, the reason I tell you about that a couple days before is because there were 2 instigators in that group that was on our side. I actually stood up on a light pole so I could kind of see over everything that was going on. And there was this young black woman wearing a big security coat, and she was clearly like revving people up. They were instigating. There was another guy that was there that were trying to rile people up, create violence. And at one point, she was probably less than 4 or 5 feet from me. I heard somebody ask her a question, and I heard her say that she was paid to be there. And nothing clicked for me. I'm an engineer, so it really kind of ticked me off because, you know, obviously President Trump tweeted about this weeks before. It gave the left an opportunity to plan this, to make this thing look like an insurrection, because at the time, you have to set the context. They were absolutely holding their breath because they knew full well the election was illegitimate. And they were so worried about the state legislatures coming together and decertifying this thing. And they knew they had to get, you know, at one point through November, they knew they had to get to the winter break, to get through that, nothing was going to happen. And then we're at January 6th. This is like 2 weeks away from, you know, the certification of the election and everything, you know, the inauguration on January 20th, all this kind of stuff. And so they're incredibly nervous. So the morning of January 6th, I love the JW Marriott because it looks over Freedom Plaza on Pennsylvania Avenue. There was just like mobs of people. I couldn't believe the amount of people, you know, that were there. It was amazing. So it was also freezing. It was like so cold, it was ridiculous. So we walked over to the Ellipse, which is a 50-acre park, sort of between the National Monument and the White House. And we actually walked through it the night before, and they were setting up sound. And somewhere, I think it was some people we talked to the night before, they said that there was a permit for 30,000 people. And that's what they were setting up sound for. We ended up walking out the next morning, and we stood on Constitution Avenue, which is kind of between the National Monument and the Ellipse. There was millions of people there. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And to define what the environment was like, I would say it was sort of a combination of a rodeo and a NASCAR race. Seriously, like it was a very patriotic crowd. And the people that were right next to us was an older gentleman in a wheelchair. He had to be 130, 140 years old. And his daughter was with him. And I mean, that tells you kind of the nature of the crowd. This is not a violent crowd. This is a very patriotic crowd. And the fact that it was freezing cold and the production was at least an hour behind. And it was very difficult to hear because we were on Constitution Avenue, hundreds of yards from the stage, and we couldn't hear very well. We were literally straining to hear. So the lady wanted to get her dad out of there, and so my buddy and I offered to kind of clear a pathway to get out of there. This was while President Trump was speaking. We couldn't hear him anyway, so what was the difference? Which kind of goes into this narrative around, you know, why, you know, did Trump say to go and, you know, attack the Capitol or something? First of all, even if he did, which he didn't, we couldn't hear him anyways, you know, so what's the point? So anyway, we're only, you know, a few minutes walk from our hotel. So we walked back to the hotel. My guess is Trump was probably still speaking when we walked into our hotel. We were going to drop a backpack and we were going to, you know, wait a little bit, and then we were going to go down to the Capitol. I walked in the room. I don't remember whether the TV was on or whether we turned it on, but you guys know how it is in the hotel. It's always news, right? It was CNN, and they were already talking about an insurrection at the Capitol, and I was like, instantly, I remembered the night of the 4th. The gal said she was paid to be there. I was like flaming, probably close to as mad as I've ever been in that moment. I told my buddy, we have to go to the Capitol now. And so we went out, we started walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. I went live on Facebook. It was probably as animated as I've ever been. I've never sworn on social media before. I swear under my breath all the time. I get mad at myself. But I don't think I did there. I ended up having to delete the video because my buddy is a captain for Alaska Airlines. And we were afraid he was going to get fired. So, you know, we went to the Capitol. We saw everything happening. Obviously, we didn't go in the building. I ended up standing next to a gal that works for Nancy Pelosi. And I was talking to her, and she told me that they were told not to come to work that day. They were supposed to work from home. And she had walked over there with her boyfriend, And so it was an interesting experience there. No violence. There was just not any violence. And you know, so anyway, it was a very interesting perspective. I went back a few months later. You guys remember when Matt Gaetz and MTG and I think Louis Gohmert went to the DC Gulag jail and they tried to get in to kind of see what's going on. MTG did end up getting in there, but I went the next week. I was back in DC and we went to shoot a video and we got so harassed. Got the guards from we were on the sidewalks, very legal. The guards from the jail tried to kick us out. We said, well, you probably should call the DC police because we're legal to be here. Of course, the DC police came and pulled them to pound sand. So we shot the video. While we were shooting the video, a guy named Carl Dresch, who had been in that DC Gulag for 6 months in solitary confinement most of that time, was pasty white, was not allowed to shave or get a haircut, do anything because he refused the jab. And he came out, and while we were shooting the video, much like this setup, and it was a teleprompted deal, and he walked up and he was literally in tears because of what we were talking about. And so I ended up interviewing him live. And that video went viral. We had millions of views in just a few days. It was a very hot time for that. Today, eventually that video got a shadow banned and the views started going down. And today you can still find the video on YouTube if you look for it, but it only has I think last I looked it was down to 220,000 views. It had tens of millions of views. It was crazy. But they shadow banned that. So that's kind of an overview of my story, but let me tell you why I'm here today. And I'll make this brief. Because our country is based on the Bible, for starters. The foundation of our republic is based on biblical principles. Our Bill of Rights, which make up the first 10 amendments to our Constitution, are quite interesting when you evaluate them. About half of them have to do with the treatment of prisoners. You have to ask yourself, why would our framers be so concerned about the treatment of prisoners? I'll make sure that you understand, I did not say the treatment of criminals. I said the treatment of prisoners. So why was it that our framers were so concerned about the treatment of prisoners? You can read especially the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th Amendments, all directly tied to the treatment of prisoners. It's because our framers understood that tyrannical leaders, when they can't win, they will imprison you. And they will falsely accuse you. And they will do things that are completely unjust. And that's the reason why the majority of our Bill of Rights have to do with the unjust treatment of prisoners. And they give us rights within that process. And I want you to understand that. That is the reason why I'm here today. That is the reason why I'm fighting for this. The truth absolutely has to come out. This is probably one of the most affrontive, ridiculous, unconstitutional acts that has ever happened in the history of our country. And nobody wants to talk about it. Only now today, some of the truth is starting to trickle out, but the media will not cover it. The masses do not know about it. And I'm here today to defend the 1.2 million people that have lost their lives in defense of this country, who served in our military, who no longer have a voice. The millions of people around the world who lost their lives, who no longer have a voice because they were forced to take this ridiculous COVID jab that killed millions of people. Because of the people that were in DC on January 6th who are no longer with us because they took their lives because they could not handle the stress of the treatment that was put upon all of us who were in DC simply exercising our constitutional rights. Those are the reasons why I'm here today, and I'm very appreciative for all of you being here today, and especially for the people sitting up here who have openly endured this tyranny. Thank you, and God bless you.
Election integrity was clearly the foundational element that was top of mind with everybody there. Now, if you come from Washington State, obviously you already mentioned the 2004 Gregoire race has already been brought up once. And I know I did a lot of work on election integrity myself. Can you tell me how much that was motivating the protests that you saw and the people that you saw there in D.C.? Just any of you answer that. Taylor looks like she... Oh.
It was big for me. I worked with Amber Kravac, if you know her, election integrity, looking at how we have so many chain of custody problems in our state. And how could Trump have been so far ahead and you wake up in the morning and you lost? And now they just discovered 800,000 non-good ballots in Oregon.
Voters. Yeah,
Yep.
non.
Voters, sorry,
Yeah.
I spaced. But 800,000. And our state is refusing to turn over the voter rolls. So when we get to here, we're not done with this. We're just starting. That was my impetus. And plus Trump said, come. So I went.
Election integrity is and was the underlying cause of January 6th. It was the foundation of why we went. You heard a little bit of my story, like I was a political atheist. Like I didn't care. I never followed a voting poll. I never followed anything like that until I got to this point and thought that I'd be a silent majority and I'd let my vote speak for itself. Until my vote was disenfranchised. I've talked to Brandy Cruz, who believes that that election was safe and fair, but I got her to change her mind by just saying this. Never mind voting machines. There was election law that was changed by governors, Supreme Court, even county auditors. Election law was changed because of COVID. And the Constitution provides the only way election law can be changed is by state legislature. Right? These are things that I knew, and I was like unequivocal. And I was like, well, do you believe that happened? She's like, well, yes, I do. And then remember the defining moment of my, and I'll say red pilling, was Hunter Biden's laptop for me, and the cover-up. And what I saw in the media that was Hunter Biden's laptop is 51 CIA agents at the time said it was Russian misinformation, right? And then I watched Tucker Carlson, and they had Tony Bublisky talk about the back end of everything. And I'm like, somebody's lying here. Because neither of these things could be true at the same time. So the cover-up of Hunter Biden's laptop supposedly prevented about 15% of people voting for Trump, that cover-up. So did you think that happened? I asked Brandy. She's like, yes, I did. And I said, do you believe that the Twitter files that came out, where Matt Taibbi released documentation that showed the government was censoring conservatives and shadow banning statements of good things against Trump? And she said, yes, I do. I go, don't you think that indicates election integrity problem? She's like, well, maybe I need to reconsider what my definition of election integrity is. I didn't talk about Dominion. I didn't talk about dead voters. I just talked about these things that I really knew of. As we know, is that there are more votes for Biden than there ever was for any Democrat president ever. More than Kamala. I mean, the votes were like 10 million more than what Kamala. Well, there's all these things, and there are just a few. If you remember that, there are just a few key components in states and counties that could be breached. Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, those 5 swing states, to push a small amount of changes. And so all of those things led me to open my eyes to then go, oh my gosh, America and voting is not what I thought. I need to do something. I didn't know what else to do. It was the only platform open to me, the only journey, the only thing I saw. I didn't know you guys, right? I was stuck on my computer. And I'm like, we need to take action in person and do these things. And so I went. And, I'm lucky. I didn't end up in prison for years. I had 30 days for picketing, right? But we went through that same process. So anyway, that's my election integrity scenario that got me there.
I probably associated with close to 150 January 6ers going through the DC gulag and the different prisons that I ended up in 4 different prisons. And so I've met a lot of January 6ers, and I would say unequivocally election integrity and the physical act of vote counting and how that went down in the different states is not even close. It's the number one. It's the reason the whole thing was called in the first place. A lot of people will tie in COVID and other things, and those things only apply to January 6th in this relationship to an overall grand conspiracy, right? Reaching all the way back to Charlottesville, we now know the SPLC was paying for the event that created the Trump's a racist and says not neo-Nazis are good people hoax that led to Russiagate, that led to Ukrainegate, that led to COVID, within the suspension of the state constitutions to allow for mail-in balloting. And because in 2020 I'd had a podcast, I followed all of the different things that were happening. So as one state would say, okay, we're suspending the in-person voting and we're doing mass mail-in voting. States like Wisconsin, who'd never had more than 1,200 absentee ballots ever in the history of their state, suddenly we're processing 1.5 million. And then you start seeing things like, oh, because people vote in person in Wisconsin, they don't really police the voter rolls. And we just found out recently there's 8.5 plus million people registered to vote in Wisconsin. The problem is Wisconsin only has 4.5 million adults. So, it makes you kind of go, wow, I mean, if you're just printing ballots based on registered voters, no wonder you can get to these red state turning blue in this funny election. Or, I'm often remember when the former Attorney General of Kansas held a press conference in Pennsylvania. He was hired by a USPS truck driver who was tasked with, the night before the election, delivering an entire semi-truck trailer full of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. Now, why ballots would need to go from New York to Pennsylvania the night before an election would make you wonder. And he parked it in a parking spot to go in to use the bathroom, and he came up, and the trailer was missing. The truck was there, the trailer was gone. Gone. Like, gone. Like, I'm going to lose my job. Someone just stole a United States Postal Service semi-truck trailer problem. So he calls his boss. His boss goes, oh, no big deal. Well, where is it? Don't worry about it. Calls his supervisor. Hey, my boss just said don't worry about this missing trailer, and I don't see anything in my company handbook saying that's okay. No, don't worry about it. So he held a press conference, and of course the guy had to admit to the fact that he'd had drug charges in it, because they're going to drag him through the mud. And it just kind of, whatever happened to those ballots? Oh, I don't know. You had 115% turnout, though, in some of the precincts in Pennsylvania. How about this? When you count ballots, why would you have to cover the windows with construction paper? Right? Stuff like that. And it's just, when I got arrested finally, I was pretty convinced going into J6 the election had been stolen. And after I was indicted, I had to take a really good hard look in the mirror. And I had to say, have I been deceived? Have my eyes lied to me? Have these news reports, am I being psyoped by the right to believe that, this election was stolen in order to gin up this controversy or whatever? And I went back through every single thing in every single state, from the coordinated water main leaks that turned out not to be water main leaks in Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, to the voter fraud in Nevada. I'm not even touching states like Washington or Oregon or California. Those are just written off, right? We're just written off. Like, if you're a conservative, we just write these states off. 100% mail-in voting, running through Dominion machines. It was really curious down in Arizona, Maricopa County, they had Vancouver, Washington registered voters on their machines. It's really interesting how that worked out. We had Washington voters voting in Arizona on their machines. So I would say election fraud and election integrity, it's every area, it's everything. It's everything to do with the counting, it's everything to do with the machines, it's everything to do with the mail-in voting, the chain of custody. There are certain individuals who've now nailed it down. There's 15 different ways to cheat, and they don't cheat the same in two counties next to each other. So they'll pick 3 ways to cheat in this county, they'll pick 2 ways in this county, they'll pick 4 in this county. So if one county has a problem, it doesn't replicate itself in the adjoining counties. It's become very sophisticated. We now know, and maybe I'm ahead of the curve on this stuff, but it runs out of China, runs through Iran, runs into Venezuela, and the Cuban intelligence operatives make it stick locally, because the Cubans have infiltrated almost every level of our government domestically. So a lot of people don't realize a lot of what we did down in Venezuela wasn't really about narco-terrorists, right? It wasn't really about that. Same thing with Iran. It wasn't really all room when they cheated with the machines. And more of that information is coming out, but it's a big secret. Even amongst conservatives, the ones who are in the know, this is so destabilizing to what we are as a nation and as a republic, to think that some of your favorite politicians, even on the Republican side, took advantage of the voter fraud, that some of them paid for ballot harvesting operations, that some of them paid Dominion Voting and Smartmatic, the 2 sister corporations, to win their elections, the fact that the Democrats and Republicans split our states up like territories. This is so destabilizing to us as a people, that you don't see action like you should. I've been involved in my county's elections, or not elections, excuse me, Republican Party, and I've gone through 2 voting cycles, and I just kind of have to sit back and wait because, you know, I'm on the list, right? And I have not been asked to help out with any kind of election monitoring or anything like that. They'll absolutely want me to go knock doors and raise money, but there's just an apathy around the election because, you know, one political party in this country understands that to win power in elections, you need ballots. And the other political party is still convinced that to win elections, you need voters. And there's a big difference between how those 2 operations run. One of them is focused on collecting ballots, and the other one is focused on winning hearts and minds. I think one of them has won the hearts and minds of the vast majority of the United States population. Even here in Washington State, I have my doubts that we're a blue state. But we do not focus on ballots, and they have focused on ballots for a long time, to the point that they're so brazen they would steal a USPS truck coming out of New York with ballots to win an election in Pennsylvania, right? And we just cannot fathom that.
As much as I wish J6 hadn't happened, I think it's a blessing that it did happen because this is the dialogue. You know, this is what's going on. The country needs to tell. And you know, I think good people on both sides of the aisle don't want to look at it and are having to look at it finally. And I want to be optimistic about it that we're going to clean it up. But it's too ugly just to like have an easy solution because I think there's dirty hands on both sides, and it's, you know, there's a reason why someone like me or John, who were just convicted of misdemeanor trespass, you know, going in and doing much less than what a lot of, you know, political protesters do, got the hammer smashed down on us. You know, it's a big intimidation program. There's no reason they swatted our house. They knew my wife and kids were not violent, right? They've been watching us for 4 months. There's a reason why this gaslighting happened, and even when you try to, you know, YouTube or Google what went down that day today, there's still like very little good information out there. It's garbage. It's, you know, massive gaslighting, and the conversation is just now getting started. And what are we, 6 years into this thing almost? But it's an ugly conversation that needs to happen. So that's my point.
Okay, I'll be brief. I'm sitting at the table across from our adversaries telling them what we want, because obviously the election was illegitimate. Number 1, I want them to admit the election was illegitimate. Number 2, I want them to fix the election system. Let us fix the election system so that every single voter in this country can believe that we have elections with integrity. Number 3, I want everything that Joe Obama did delegitimized, starting with Supreme Court picks that should be removed and should be selected by our party.
All right, I'm going to open this up to questions, and I'll try to encourage people, either if you have a question for somebody specifically, make it clear to them, and then we'll try to, what was the second part of it?
Like, what did you observe?
Oh, what did you observe when you were inside?
Yeah.
So, yep.
So my story was, and ironically, I entered. Testing. So I entered the Capitol 23 seconds behind Ashley Babbitt from the same exact entrance. She went left and I went right. That moment, when I saw it on closed caption TV, made me realize that God works in mysterious ways, and that could have been me. Right? It was that simple. Where I entered the Upper West Terrace Senate Wing entrance. There was no violence. I saw no damage. There were no signs. There was no restrictions. There was no recording saying not to go in. There were 5 police officers letting us in, and I walked in an orderly fashion on a handicap ramp that people were walking in and out of. I was there at 2:23 in the afternoon. At 2:23 and 50 seconds, Ashley Babbitt was 2:23:23. And I know this because it's very, very important. So I was in the Capitol for 23 minutes, and I took a right, and I walked into the crypt. I actually looked into an office space, and did not cross the threshold. And there were people in there with like their feet up and some of that stuff you might have seen. And I was like, I don't think that's right. And then I also asked myself, what am I here for, right? And I realized I was there to protest the stolen election, and I was just following this crowd, and there was no idea when we left watching Trump, we didn't go, well, we're all going to storm the Capitol now. No, we're just like, hey, I guess we're just going to take this walk and do this thing. I'm the kind of person, if it's like a general admission concert, I have my head in the speaker. I'm right down front. If there's a Seahawks championship parade, I bring my kids, and we go right down front, and we'll get stepped on by crowd control horses. The experience is part of the life that gives me. So that's why I went in, and I got to the crypt. I walked into the crypt, which is the smaller round part, not the big one, which is the rotunda. And I raised my hand and I chanted, "Stop the Steal," which we've been chanting, "Stop the Steal, USA," 4 more years, all day long. Our house. And I did that at the top of my voice and realized that that's what I was there. I was done. It was 23 minutes. Then I made my way out. I walked out through tear gas. I actually saw a hallway filled with tear gas, and I walked into that tear gas on purpose because I was lost and kind of didn't know how to get back out. Like I kind of gotten turned around or something, and I'm like, well, I'm going to see if the wives' tale of putting your T-shirt up over your nose will work with tear gas. And it did. And then I was escorted out a broken window by a police officer after 23 minutes. And that was my experience. There was no damage, but I just chanted "Stop the Steal" at the top of my voice and received a 30-day prison sentence, first Washington State resident. There have been thousands of people charged with the same misdemeanors, which was disorderly conduct, remaining in a restricted space, disorderly conduct in a restricted space, picketing and parading, and remaining and staying. 2 disorderly conducts. The only one that holds weight is the picketing, and it was black and white in my case. My attorney said I wore an "Count All Legal Votes" T-shirt, had a political statement on my shirt, and I expressed it verbally. That's the definition of picketing. There was no way I was getting out of that. Then thousands of people. And by the way, the illegal picketing is a Class B petty offense misdemeanor with the same sentencing guidelines as walking your dog off leash on a federal park. Thousands of people have been charged and got $50 tickets before me, hundreds after, right? But we were persecuted and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law so that so you would see it and none of you would stand up and raise your fist someday and go, "Stop the steal."
Yeah, real briefly, yeah, I went in for about 13 minutes, over 13 minutes, and not too unlike what John described. We were chanting, and we were at the rotunda. I remember picking up one of those velvet ropes that someone had knocked over and putting it back into his place. We were a pretty orderly crowd. There were, some water bottles on the floor and stuff like that. And then, went up and downstairs, did not know where we were at. Personally, I don't think many of us even knew that Congress had been vacated by that point. I went in at 2:38. We thought Congress was in session and they were going to be debating the whole funny business of some of these states. Because that had been the agreement days before and we saw it in the news. So we didn't know that they're gonna, what they were saying is like, everyone was fearful for their lives and running away. We did not know. Then all of a sudden, things changed about a little after 2:44 when she was shot. I don't think the people around me heard it. I didn't hear it. But then all the officers said, "You guys gotta go." And there were officers everywhere, and they were friendly, and I have pictures of people like, taking selfies with the police officers and stuff. And then it all changed when that happened in the part of the building I was at. I said, "You guys gotta go." And then if you didn't start moving, they would have you down on the floor in cuffs with a gun out. And so it got very serious very quickly. And people like these get out. Some people got held back. Those were the ones who might have, argued or something like that. We got out. Yes, and you could feel the tear gas in the air. later on in the day. Again, I didn't see it when we were going in, but later on in the day, there was tear gas out. You could smell it, feel it. And again, walked in and out of doors, door guards. I did see later on people were hanging out outside. I saw some cracked glass on one of the main doors. So, you know, I knew it wasn't all like perfect, you know, perfectly non-violent. I knew there was, you know, some stuff that had happened because I saw some broken glass. So,
I'll just close with, if there had been any police officer anywhere near me that said don't go in, of any sort, or any restricted area, no trespassing, like, I wouldn't have gone in. Now, I told my judge that, and when I told my judge that, he said, well, you're close to violating your plea right now. Because part of my plea was that I entered the restricted area to picket. But like, had somebody said don't go in, I wouldn't have gone in. Like, I'm a law-abiding conservative, right? But this is what was happening, and through the whole process, there's a mob psychology that happens, right? And I'll just,
Ever unlocked or opened is every 4 years for the inauguration, which will probably never happen there now. But it's the door that has the round window over the top of it. That's the door that they unlock when the president walks out, when they do the inauguration. That's the only time that entire side of the Capitol is ever open. But somehow, on January 6th, there was literally doors, multiple doors open on the west side of the Capitol. That's one thing I'll tell you. The second one is, and this one's a little bit comical as we look back on it, we do have to laugh at things. Do you remember the guy who was like the security guard or something inside the Capitol? And you see the initial video of the people coming through the double doors. They're outside and they're all dressed up in their crazy outfits made to look like crazy protesters. Here's the part of the video. It's sort of like the people that talk about, like, who was holding the camera on the moon, right? The security guard clearly has a camera person on him. Like, yeah, you arrange that because you're so worried about these people. Like, somebody with a camera follow, like, that would never happen, right? And it was so staged, such terrible acting. You know, when he's like backing away from the door and up the stairs, and you're like, who's on the camera? So it was all set up. It was crazy.
Next question over here. I saw your hand.
Happening here and the conversation was actually pretty discouraging because the people who were trying to make ballot harvesting happen said that they're dealing with constituents who don't want to break rules, not knowing that Washington's rules allow for the things that they were being told to do, and that it's just that it feels like cheating. Because I mean, the Democrats have set it up in a way that it actually is cheating, but it's not breaking the rules. So I would like you to amplify that it is about collecting ballots, and for us who know that that's really what's needed, to don't give a damn about the rules or the integrity of it, because they have made it possible for us to do that and to go ahead and do the ballot harvesting.
Well, I mean, I don't want to cut I talk about this stuff all the time, but so she's talking about ballot harvesting for the camera, just for the, and can you discuss ballot harvesting? And I think, Taylor, you'd mentioned ballot harvesting earlier, but because it's illegal in most states, we are one of the few foolish states that allow ballot harvesting, specifically, explicitly allowed, and encouraged, actually, by the Secretary of State and most of the auditors in the state of Washington.
I would say this, one of the things that libertarians and communists both do, because they're kind of born out of the same thought, is they weaponize your virtue against you. So by desire not to cheat or not to appear like you're cheating or not to skirt, get close to the rules, we want in-person ballots, voter ID, we have this really way we should do it. And that would be great if everybody showed up to vote and we all took care of our ballot, and that would be awesome. But the reality is, you're not going to win at a game where the other person can cheat, right? It's just not going to happen. So it doesn't mean we should cheat, but if ballot harvesting, if they're doing it, it's not a matter of do we want to do it, it's we have to do it. Pastors need to make sure the ballots from their congregations get turned in. HOA presidents need to canvass their neighborhoods if you're politically involved. PCOs need to be involved. You have to collect those ballots. because a ballot spent is a ballot that they can't use down the road, which is what we've seen in all these states that, you know, if you don't cast your ballot or it doesn't make it there, it may still be voted. And so you've got it, like, I don't like it. I would love to win so we could change the rules so that we didn't have to confront that. But I agree with Charlie Kirk, who finally realized the same thing. You have to collect them. If the other side's collecting them and they've made it legal, then we have to do that as well. But it's just not, you have to play the game that's being played. This is a zero-sum game. You either have power or you don't.
I had the chance of meeting Matt Brown, who is also working with the Washington State Republican Party. He was the chair of Yakima County GOP and spent inroads on ballot harvesting and vote and ballot printing, even from his car at the doorstep of a voter. So we talked about this, and I also had conversations with Matt Froelich, and what is in Washington State, we are in the Wild West of ballot harvesting and can do anything. You can vote multiple times. Your second vote will count. Your first vote doesn't. You can print up multiple ballots for yourself. And so in order to compete, we have to ballot harvest. And Matt has a proven track record of what he did in Yakima to flip districts and to find the right districts to flip. But this is a little bit off topic from J6, but I know that you want to comment on it.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Matt Brown, because that's who I'm going to talk about. I think the question is really about how do we justify that as conservatives? How do we feel good about, you know, doing something that feels wicked, right? And this is from Matt Brown. Matt Brown is the political director for Washington Republican Party. He's also the chair of the Yakima County Republican Party. And this is what Matt Brown says, and you guys can remember this. It's very easy. He said this: when you get better at their cheating, they will change the rules. So if you want them to change the rules, then you have to get better at ballot harvesting. So let that be your, it's legal. It doesn't mean it's ethical or it's right, but it's legal. And if we're not willing to use those rules against them, then nothing's ever going to change, and they're going to continue to try to demolish it.
All right, anybody else have back to Nancy Pelosi basically declining to have the National Guard out there, which I think is a question you meant.
The answer is it depends on what they bring out with this grand conspiracy case. Because the grand conspiracy case that has a grand jury in Florida is looking all the way back to the Charlottesville rally, all the way through the 2024 election. And Nancy Pelosi has her hands all over Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and January 6th. So it depends on the results of that. Other than that, you know, she's an old lady, and she's probably got not very many more terms left in her. But yeah, directly nothing other than that grand conspiracy case.
Next question.
Here, I'll comment a little bit on that. So one of the reasons that the J6 town hall should exist is so that we could even have a Democrat step up to the mic and say, Trump never requested 10,000 National Guard troops to help in the defense of the Capitol. Okay? That is a talking point and misinformation point that puts Nancy Pelosi refusing his help by way of optics as the true narrative of what happened. So it was put forth that the president says, yes, you can do this, but then whoever gets the request has to accept the request. There is documentation with the 10,000 troops to be requested. That was then turned down by Nancy by way of the D.C. Police Chief, Stephen Sund, which there's more information that just came out, trending topic on J6, that the D.C. Police Chief, that the riot was allowed to happen to facilitate the firing of Stephen Sund, the current D.C. Police Chief. Text messages were just released that whistleblowers came out to talk about that. But that is one of the controversial, right, misinformation questions that are on topic. Did Trump release or authorize 10,000 National Guard troops to help with the millions of protesters? Because the reality is, too, the police officers that were there were set up. They were understaffed. They didn't have help. They didn't know what was going to happen, even though there was intel through all the agencies that this was a big thing.
Next question here. Anybody else? There you are up front. Ben.
My question is has to do with the upcoming midterm elections and what we've been seeing in parts of MAGA where you have people who were claiming to be MAGA now saying don't vote and Trump is not MAGA and they're trying to, I think there's infiltration on the right that is being exposed. Can you just talk about how important the midterms are and do you feel like something's being set up in the way the January 6th was or something like that coming up in business?
And I'm going to repeat that. So the question for those of you who probably couldn't hear back there is talk about how important, and I'm paraphrase for you here, the 2024 elections are, and with a lot of different narratives and misinformation, is it possible that there's another setup in the works to create a similar situation, and could you address that?
Well, I think every election is fraught with problems, but we have gotten a lot better since 2020. So if anybody feels like there's no hope, do not feel that way. There are more eyes on it now. CISA is now dealing with the cyber fraud. Tulsi Gabbard's grabbed the ballots. She's grabbed voting machines. We obviously have the forensic analysis that Tina Peters do. We should be getting out in June. So there's a lot of encouraging things. As far as the psychological operations to split the base, that is absolutely happening. However we like it or not, the reasons why some of the international behavior that Donald Trump has had is often chalked up to he's being pro-Israel, and that becomes kind of a wedge. I don't view that the same way at all. I think, when you actually look at what Netanyahu has done in his state, he has a deep state. Their judicial system was based on the British system. So in Israel, a judge was an officer of the British King's Court, and he had to separate their Supreme Court from Britain. And so I think there's a little bit less, we're helping Israel by helping Netanyahu. Helping Israel used to mean helping England, Britain, the banking system. So I just think it's a psyop. I think that you have a lot of Qatari money going into libertarian-leaning candidates to try to create a wedge between the MAGA base and Israel, and I think you have a lot of Israeli money trying to, make wedges. Everything's a psyop. You have to just listen to the president and judge for yourself. That's my take. Is you have no idea when you're getting your information online. Even some of your favorite podcasters and stuff like that, a lot of them over time kind of show their colors. So that's my take, is it's always a psyop if they're trying to split you from your president.
First of all, don't ever doubt President Trump. You guys haven't seen everything that he's gone through over the years. I'll just tell you for myself, the attacks and the targeting for me has cost my wife and I $1.3 million. That's not the campaign stuff. That's like $5.5 million. Just targeting, just defending ourselves against state agencies, against the IRS, against all these agencies coming after us. Do not doubt President Trump. Our guy is fighting for us with everything that is in him. And everything that he has been through, he's still on point fighting for us. And so I just think we're foolish to doubt that. In terms of the 26th election, I don't feel like we've made a lot of ground, especially here in Washington State. I am very confident that Washington State is a red state. JoAnn mentioned earlier the Oregon 800,000, fraudulent voters. Oregon has half the population of Washington. Captain Seth Michelle for a long time has said that Washington has at least 700,000 fraudulent voters. If our ratios with Oregon are anything close to that, we probably have something more like 1.6 million fraudulent voters on the rolls. We're losing statewide races by 400, 500,000 votes. So that tells you kind of where our state's at. So, but we ought to have hope. Every single step forward, we just never know what's going to happen. And we got to be active and do everything we can to make sure that, we're exposing the fraud and you know, putting ourselves out there to make sure that, you know, we can stop the bad things that are happening. Sometimes people ask me, it's like, you know, you're one of 435, you get elected to Congress, what are you going to do? I'll tell you, the number one thing I'm going to do is prevent some dirtbag from getting in this seat.
All right, next question here. Well, you got them here. This is the opportunity to ask your question, otherwise I'm jumping in. Right here, right up front. You're close to the front, so you get to ask. So, Victoria.
I can ask you questions all day.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay, I live in Seattle, where 95% of people believe the mainstream narrative. You know, they've been shown that. Oh, yeah. I live in Seattle, where 95% of the people, the voters, my neighbors, believe the mainstream narrative. You know, they've been told what to believe about it. They've been shown images of people jumping on tables and even, you know, defecating, whatever the negative side of it was. What's the one thing you would say is, you know, the one thing I could point out that would break the narrative, you know, in your opinion? What one fact kind of would throw a wrench in their story?
I'll start with that one. Testing? Yeah. Okay. So my experience and conversations with thousands of radical corporate media believing Democrats that there's not a chance in hell they would ever change their mind is this. There is about 33, last numbers are like 34% of the country believes or has trust in corporate media. It's a real statistic. 34% of the country still believes CNN is honest journalism. By the way, prior to October of 2020, I believe that too, right? So I was in that space. Of those 33%, about, at least my experience is about half of those fall in line with, I will say, hardcore, progressive, crazy, gender-leading ideology that's dangerous, and they will kill us, literally. There's no one the left hates more than Charlie Kirk or Trump than J6ers. We have security here. So that some people you just cannot change, okay? If I were to give one, the only thing that I can, from a first-hand basis, when people say, and I've been told, I've received thousands of death threats, thousands, that I should be hung up on a short branch with a long rope, or a short rope and a long, or should still be in prison for illegal picketing for the rest of my life, that we're all traitors. And they go, look at this. And I'll say, that's not me, okay? We were grouped with people who may have caused real harm, but that was not us. Those people causing major problems, we know that there was infiltration. There was no counter-protest to J6. The counter-protest that normally happens on any conservative anything happened within J6 itself. So that, the nature of those, by the way, there's about 50 Antifa that were arrested, known Antifa, arrested and pardoned, that were there to cause problems, right? There were also many conservative men there that were upset and pissed off with the government. Heck, I'm pissed off with the government right now, right? But in that space of anger and mob psychology, those type of people will do whatever they think is necessary to get a thought process on the subject and get things heard, or just to cause problems themselves. So that's what I would tell you, is that the nature of all of that, the one thing is, it can't be, the whole process can't be put onto one person's feet that they are the criminal.
If you're talking to someone in Seattle who thinks J6 was nonsense, say, well, do you think that Fox News covers the BLM protests accurately? And they'll usually go, no, they don't. Well, what would make you think CNN would cover J6 accurately, right? And what John says about there being no counter-protest on January 6th is very true, because the counter-protesters that were there dressed up in orange and black as Proud Boys or dressed up as MAGA protesters. So I was in prison with a couple different Antifa people who were arrested alongside us and were in the Gulag with us. They suffered everything that the Gulag had to offer right alongside us. There's one gentleman named Zach Alam. He was the one who broke the window that Ashley Babbitt jumped through. And one day I had him in the TV room. It was just he and I was like, are you Antifa? And he does this thing where he doesn't answer yes. Well, when did you get active? Oh, it was the Occupy Walstreet protests. So that's when he got activated as Antifa. He was from DC. And he broke the window that Ashley Babbitt jumped in. She punched him in the face. His glasses fell off. He stepped aside. She looked down the stairwell, saw the SWAT team, went to jump through the window to get away, and that's where she was shot. He said, with tears in his eyes to me, as if it was the first time he'd said it, she actually saved my life, because I was going to go through that window. And in that same hallway was John Sullivan, another person a lot of people consider Antifa. My trial overlapped with him. I got to know him. I didn't really get to know him, but I got to know his mom pretty well. And anyways, there were quite a few Antifa that were there. John said 50. The accurate number is about 144 of the 1,580 January 6th defendants. 144 of them are either confirmed or based on their social media, we believe they were Antifa, and they did coordinate prior to Go Cause nonsense. They didn't believe they'd get arrested either, but once it happened, it's just like the brown shirts. They get lined up and taken out with everyone else, and that's what happened.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to say to you. So one was to kind of corroborate the no calendar protest. So when I was talking earlier, I mentioned that I'd stayed at the same hotel twice, 3 weeks earlier, and then later at the J6 thing. And 3 weeks earlier, massive protests, like till 2 in the morning, hard to get sleep at night, fireworks going off, double row police officers with bicycles lined up, just keeping the hotel people from getting attacked. It was like, whoa, this is a crazy place. When I go back 3 weeks later, there was that BLM square across the street from the hotel empty. Nobody there. No protest. The stores were boarding up because they knew something was going to go down. So like Five Guys Burgers 3 weeks ago was open for business. This time it was boarded up. The city knew something was going to go down, but there were no protesters in the streets. Okay, so, and later on we figured out, okay, they changed their uniforms for that day. So the next thing I wanted to say was to kind of combat the narrative. What we're doing here is the reach out. Like, we're normal people, right? We're like you. And so I think the more that we can just get out there and say, hey, I know somebody that was there, and his family went through the ringer, but he's a normal guy. He's not like a criminal. I know these people for real. I looked at them in the eyes. And then, you know 6 people, 12 people, and people can spread the word that way. There is some hope that, Americans are not that dumb. Okay? They're a savvy group of people. At the same time, what John was saying is there are some very hard set things that you may not get through. You may not get through. My brother grew up with me. We've known each other our whole lives, right? We're kids together. And my friends, we're all in each other's weddings. Some of us went to college together. We know we're not scumbags, okay? But they might be on the other side of the aisle politically. They have told me, Joe, there's no way you're ever going to convince me that J6 was not an insurrection. Okay, they know me, right? They believe CNN over me, and I've told them multiple times this is what went down. Here's my 96 pictures and videos I took. Here's the police holding the door for me. They're still like, Joe, you're never going to convince me that was not an insurrection. So, yeah, there's obviously some people you're not going to convince.
Americans, we have no reason to lie. We actually saw it with our own eyes, and for the video, and for those of you who are here, if you can remember this, read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12.
The only other thing I'm going to add statements about me, and now I'm working with them as activists. And so I do want to point out that things change, over time, and different people have different inflection points in their own life. For John, it was seeing the Hunter Biden laptop, right? And that suddenly changed him. Sometimes for leftists I know that have been mugged or had their house broken into or they were attacked, maybe that's what it is, or their business got shut down. I don't know. It's actually different for everybody. And I think it's important to kind of remember that. There's people you're going to disagree with today that may actually be on your side in the future, and you can't control what it is in their life or even understand always what it is that makes them change. Maybe it's having kids. Maybe it's, you don't know. There's something in their life that changes. So I do see that does happen probably more than people realize. But you're not going to necessarily convince them liberty and freedom. You won't convince them yelling at them at a protest. So, I've never once, when I used to protest as a college student and I had leftists on the other side threatening to kill me back then, I never once convinced them that they were wrong and I was right in a protest confrontation. But sometimes later on, they come about, those decisions on their own.
One thing you can be sure of, nobody ever breaks left. They only break right. Okay, you never find a conservative that goes, that conservatism's for the birds. I'm a progressive now. You'll never find that. People have reality hit them in the face, and they break right every time.
Another question right here, Paul.
I have maybe an irrelevant question, but I'm just curious if any of you think it ties in with any of this. And it's called redistricting. And we've seen it front and center this year, and my prediction is it's going to get worse. 2028, we may have a congressman sitting right here, and they draw the lines just like our American flag from Spokane to Bellevue, and they create 10 districts that are Democratic. So I don't think we've seen anything yet. Does the redistricting, which is a powerful thing, have anything to do with all this?
Well, I'm not going to be encouraging here, but I do want to tell you the truth. If you think the last 5 years has been difficult, buckle up. I'm serious. One of the challenges that I see happening, and I've been saying this for years, is we don't have the correct appetite for this fight. We think that just because President Trump got elected, everything's okay, everything's going to be fine. We live in the most radical, the craziest, the most demonic state in our country, and it's not going to get fixed quickly. It's probably 15 to 20 years. For many of us, especially those of us who have less days ahead than we have behind us, this is going to be the fight of our lives. This is a fight for our kids and our grandkids. In terms of redistricting, honestly, I would bet almost everything that our governor and AG have already had the conversation of trying to figure out how they can manipulate our state legislature to call a special session in the next few weeks to initiate redistricting right here in our state. And if they can't do that, they certainly will try to do it whenever they can. And, the reality is the accurate view of this is that they've been doing that to us for decades. I've seen the numbers across the country, and there are many states, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but there are states like Maine that has 43% conservatives. President Trump got 43% of the voters in that state, but they don't have a single congressman in Congress. How do you justify that? That is because of this gerrymandering. As someone who is likely going to win this election, I'll say that my desire would be that we organize the districts based on the ease of ability of that representative to serve their community. Not based on gender, not based on skin color, not based on anything else other than that. Let's carve these districts up to make it as easy as possible for the representatives to be able to serve their district. And so we're gonna, the biggest thing is that I want to repeat, there's a lot of fatigue among leaders in Washington State who have been leading this fight. And they're hurting. Even if you can't see it, trust me, they are. And I just want to tell you that we have to gird ourselves up, we have to encourage each other, and we have to be ready for a fight that's longer than we want it to be.
I'm going to grab it first. I was going to say, just with regards to the redistricting, you've got to be involved. If you showed up here today, you need to be involved in your local county Republican Party, You need to become a precinct committee officer or a precinct captain and volunteer. And these changes, we didn't get here overnight. It takes decades, and it will take decades to fully pull this place back. But when I go to the Republican Party and I'm doing everything I can to generate support and stuff like that, it's crickets. You know, we get more people that come out to an event like this than some of the counties have at their local Republican Party meetings. And then we ask the question about gerrymandering. If you're not at your local Republican Party, you're acquiescing to whatever they end up doing. Your voice isn't going to be heard very loud. So get involved. That's the only check on that. The only check on their power are the people. And you've got to be involved, and be involved for the long haul. You know, I've not heard one of the Republican counties that's like, oh yeah, no, they're really on top of it. They're fatigued. They fight a battle every stinking day. They need your fresh blood to come in and stick around long enough to actually get some influence and make a difference.
So I can tie in January 6th and the redistricting exactly, and how it absolutely pertains to us. And that's the redistricting that's happening even in other states than Washington. And that is, remember, I'm kind of new to politics, right? And a lot of my bandwidth is just by what I've been through, focuses on J6 related things, right? That's what sticks in my brain. That's what I learned. But I also worked my way through our county politics. I became state committee man in my county, which I'm not very active there right now for a reason. And we're in the same county, right? But the reason is my organization and volunteering time that I'm taking is doing this, is putting things like this together. I'm uniquely qualified to get J6ers and those that were in attendance to a spot. To them, they might raise their hand, say, I went, so you can recruit them, because they will be champions and run for office and wave every banner and do all of that. The redistricting question pertains to us across the country. I wasn't really aware of what gerrymandering was or any of that, but I've seen what's going on, right? I certainly believe that there shouldn't be, black districts. Neither does the Supreme Court. And I'm like, okay. So the reality is this for us. If this country is ruled by Democrats again, President, Congress, Senate, there's a strong likelihood we're going to get round up again. But they're going to come after us again. We talk about it all the time. What's the next shoe that's going to drop? Don't think that they wouldn't do that, double jeopardy or anything like that, right? The Democrat doesn't care. They don't care about what the Constitution says or does. They care about power, right? So the redistricting that now we are catching up with the gerrymandering that's happening in other Democrat states, that all the leaders in the Democrat Party are upset about, means that we will have some additional congressmen that are Republicans. So that's how, hopefully, that will stop us from being picked up in the next 4 years, like the next term. We worry about that.
We can just make it 10 more before.
Right. Literally, we seriously worry about that, right? So that's how we look from a J6 perspective. That's what we look at.
There's another question right here. Yes.
Well, to ask about that, you have a pardon, right? So
right? In my case, a pardon and $7 gets me a coffee. It means absolutely nothing, right? I still have the charge on my record. For somebody like Taylor, and I know his wife, it means everything, because it got him out of prison. Okay? So that doesn't matter. They will find a way to reverse the pardon.
One of the things that made me really nervous was when Donald Trump reversed Joe Biden's pardons. Because if they take any action on that and prosecute someone that he pardoned, for example, Anthony Fauci, you guys might all cheer. I'll run into my room and cry. Because I have 6 more years left on my sentence. Which means if they reverse his pardon and prosecute him or any of the people that got a pardon, it opens the door politically for the next president to reverse my pardon, round me up, and put me back in prison, because I still had more time. For the people that had completed their prison, they couldn't put me back on trial, that would be double jeopardy, but they could reinstate my sentence. So those are the kind of things that I get really nervous about, reversing a pardon because it's an auto pen. Well, go adjudicate the auto pen. Don't just say, hey, a president can reverse a pardon of the previous president, because it is a huge liability. I do worry about that a lot.
Okay, the other part of my question, the other question I wanted to ask before that one was, what about Ray Epps? Like, why? We all know Ray. Like,
Let me talk about
what the
Ray
heck
Epps.
is going on? This guy is not being prosecuted, and the whole thing.
I gotta grab this one. I'm hogging the mic for Ray Epps. Okay, so when I got into the DC Gulag, I sat down with a gentleman named James Grant. So if you watch the video of Ray Epps pushing the bike rack, there was James Grant was on his left, and Ryan Sandlin was on his right. Ryan Sandlin is a crazy dude. Samsel, excuse me. Ryan Samsel is a crazy dude. He is a brawler, Italian gangster, and just, that's it, okay? That guy's looking for a fight every day of his life. And he'd had some previous prison time and whatnot as well. James Grant had just been accepted to Alabama Law School, and he was getting ready to go down to law school, and he was just there, you know, doing what we were all doing, protesting a stolen election. Ray Epps whispered into the ear of James and into the ear of Ryan, and they pushed that bike rack. And Ryan kind of got into it with the female officer that was right in there, kind of on top of her. James tried to pull her off, and then Ray Epps said, let's go, and they took him all the way up to the Capitol, and then Ray Epps bailed off. Ray Epps went and ended up taking a sign, right, one of these Make America Great Again signs, plywood signs, and crowd surfed it up the crowd. Every single person who touched that sign got charged with assault with a deadly weapon, 111B, except for Ray Epps. James Grant and Ryan Samsel, there's a Sandlin as well, but they were in the gulag with me, okay? Ray Epps was out free. While I was in prison, Ray Epps got charged with a single misdemeanor. The only J6er that got one misdemeanor. If you got misdemeanors, you got 4 or 5, right? He got one misdemeanor. Within 1 month, he took a plea deal, and Judge James Boasberg said, oh, your life has been ruined by all the negative media reporting on your life, and he gave him 1 year unsupervised probation as his penalty. Ray Epps undoubtedly was a plant, undoubtedly went there with a plan and a mission. When I got in with James Grant, who'd been incarcerated for a good chunk of this time, I said, dude, you were the one next to Ray Epps. What did he say in your ear? He goes, I don't remember. He's like, he really didn't remember. It was just, you know, he said something and it didn't stick. And I said, well, you know, are you guys going to, like, you're going to go to trial, or are you going to pull him up as a witness to figure out what it was that he said? Oh, no, my attorney said we're not allowed to subpoena him. The court has said he's off limits. And he didn't even know his name. I informed him of his name. I said, that was Ray Epps. Oh, I wondered who that guy was. He had no idea. He'd been in 2.5 years at that point. Had no idea who Ray Epps was. So Ray Epps, yes, absolutely. Figure out who Ray Epps is. And what you're probably going to unwind with Ray Epps is not Antifa. You're going to find establishment Republicans that were part of that. Ray Epps is not tied to Antifa. He's tied to Republicans and a Republican counter-op that was going on there. J6 is full of ops. It wasn't just Antifa. It wasn't just Pelosi. There were people on the right as well trying to cause chaos. And Ray Epps is tied in with the pipe bomber. That was extremely tight, the timing on that. For when the pipe bomber was discovered, and then 2 minutes later, they did what they did, and it was just absolute precision.
Weirdest thing, there were at least, I think it was him and maybe 1 or 2 other people going around that crowd when it wasn't too noisy, because, you know, when people are speaking, it's noisy. But they're kind of like huddling up people like, hey, come on, guys, you know what's going to happen tomorrow? We may just have to go in the building tomorrow. And everyone would just kind of like look at them like, nah, I don't think so, and we just walk away. And then I didn't even think about it until like later on when all this stuff went down in the news. I'm like, oh, yes, yeah. That was not a mistake. So, yeah. A couple of people even said that dude might be a Fed. So anyway, it's real. I was there. I saw it, and at the time I had no idea what was going on. But then later on, I'm like, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, Ray Epps also is the only J6er that had positive puff pieces written about him. New York Times, the only one. The only J6er who was defended by, at the J6 committee, Adam Kinzinger defended him. So find really the backstory of Ray Epps, and more will be revealed. And more is being revealed every day on different things. So we had a question there. Yeah, you raise your hand for a question.
Yeah, I was curious. I know what you had to say
we take away from this? I hope we never forget. I remember 9/11. I've been in the Persian Gulf, and J6 is one of those events in our time that stands out, and I think we should each commit to sharing that with somebody in our precinct where we're elected, and that we gather more people and speak the truth to those people. And I'm wondering if that's the real takeaway here. It's not going to be on the battle lines in the middle of a protest where we're going to make a difference. Is that a meaningful action to be taken?
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and hopefully you heard my opening, which really kind of covered that. But I will say that just as by way of encouragement about the time that we're in right now, that we should all be very excited and blessed to be alive for such a time as this. You know, it is a difficult time, but it's not a time of real question in terms of our faith in God. You know, God has chosen us to be alive during such a time as this. Praise God for that. You know, and He's given us our faith and Himself in us to be able to endure this, which in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, you know? So I would just encourage you to be joyful every day, being alive today, to be able to see, to be able to witness, just like those of us who were in D.C. on January 6th got to witness it with our own eyes. As the course of history unfolds, we are the ones who get to witness what's going on today. God is moving in the world today. And for those people here who don't believe in God, then I'm happy to talk to you. But we should be very excited to be alive today. And my favorite book of the Bible, I have some hats in there. It says on the right side of the hat, favorite book of the Bible is the book of James, which can be summarized in 3 words: pray and act.
Another question over here.
I wanted to respond to that.
Okay.
One of the things is 35 Americans were arrested that lived in Washington State for J6. There's 35. I've spoken to most of them. There's 16 of us that are kind of in our crew that are, you know, on a text thread. We meet semi-regularly. We're meeting more regularly, but semi-regularly. There's a long process for somebody who's been through what we've done that gets them to through a grieving process and through the trauma and destruction, to have the courage to do anything and sit up and talk versus burying their head in the sand or running away, right? So we have, and it takes time. There's a huge grieving process, like the nature of grief, right? Denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, right? And so we have, he's a little bit different, but just because he's just a little bit different. He has a podcast. He's like very dialed in and that sort of thing. But we have other strong, courageous men who just shut the door on this and never want to talk about it again. Right? And I'm just going to start the closing process because we're getting towards the end of this event. I'm going to cover some of the questions that weren't asked, and I'm just going to run through these really quickly. So these are questions that come up all the time. One, we didn't talk about Ashley Babbitt too much, right? But there are many who, Ashley Babbitt was shot in the neck by Officer Michael Bird through a window with police officers behind her. And most of the left will talk about that, you know, she F-A-F-O. He was doing his job, right? And we could talk about her at length. No police officers died on January 6th, not one. News reports will cite it, politicians will cite it, not a single officer died on January 6th. And then Brian Sicknick is an officer who the Washington Post reported was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher that day. That was a complete made-up fabrication, who died later. The double standard of had a stroke and died from lack of, but he died from lack of treatment. We could have had a whole conversation about the double standard of justice. No conservative can receive a fair trial in Washington, D.C. because the jury is 92.5% Democrat, and every one of us would have been on trial with a judge who was a victim himself. Those judges are the same judges that have stopped Trump every step of the way. Jeb Boasberg, Beryl Howell, all of them. That lawfare is the same fight that we went through. It is the same exact fight. 140 officers claimed injury. The majority of those officers sprayed pepper spray and got pepper spray sprayed back into their faces. There's a big lie and a report that feces was smeared on the walls of Washington, D.C. Washington Post reported this, and it came from an aide of Adam Schiff. There's a complete lie. If there was any feces or urine ever in D.C. during January 6th, we would all have 1,000 photos of that plastered across all of our news feeds. So I just wanted to talk. There's more and more to talk about this, but my personal closing, and I'm going to close with this. The amount of community and familial destruction this has caused. I don't know if has anybody ever had a problem with a family member or a friend due to your political beliefs? Okay, right. Remember my story, and I'm going to defend my ex in that I'm not the man she married. I'm not that same guy, right? The nature of, I have two liberal fathers, born and raised in Washington. It's a long story, I have two. They won't talk to me. I have a best friend I lost. Part of my wife's story, and part of other J6ers, I'm not the only J6er who lost their marriage, is that when this happened, she was supportive in the beginning, and then guess what happened? And she didn't realize it. Her brother said, I'm not going to have anything to deal with you because of your husband. Then her best friend said, I'm not going to have anything to deal with you. The best friend where we've been in each other's, watched our, helped our kids get delivered. Two of them. Not going to have anything to do with you because of your husband. Then financial devastation rolled through, right? So that community and familial devastation is what has torn through this, right? And then lastly, we talked about it, and I'll close with what Taylor talked about. We need to get active locally. I know most of us here are.
Her first birthday, so we're quite smitten with that. And I love this country. I'm a veteran, and I have been in this fight for 5 years. I ran in 22, didn't make it through the primary, had no idea what I was doing. Ran again in 24, got President Trump's endorsement, won the primary against Dan Newhouse, the incumbent in Central Washington. Unfortunately, we have this stupid thing called the jungle system, which forced me to face Dan Newhouse in the general. So Republican on Republican. Of course, who are the Democrats going to vote for? So he got the majority of his votes came from Democrats. He needed a handful of Republicans. Of course, there's enough TDS Republicans to be able to support him. He just barely won the general. My pressure on him got him to retire. So he's not running this cycle. There are 11 people in the race. There is only one person in the race that has a shot to win, and there's only one person who's been in this race ever since Dan Newhouse voted to impeach the best president of our lives, and it's me. I'm running against two people in the race who I call squishy politicians, okay? I'm tired of the go along to get along, resume building politicians in this state that are trying to get into these positions so that they can further themselves instead of our agenda. I'm an engineer, a business guy, built a great business, I've had a great life, there's honestly nothing else on my resume, there's no more space. I've had an amazing life. The American dream has been very good to me. I want to go and fight for you. I started a project called Rescue Washington. You can go to rescuewashington.com to read about that. I believe that we can rescue this state. I'm an engineer. I thought this out. I planned it out. Like Glenn always says, the future belongs to those that show up. But guess what? If you want to win the future, you have to plan today. And I believe the people that are going to win our future political fights are the ones who are planning and envisioning that win today and putting the pieces in place to do that. So what can you do? We are leading the polls in Washington State. Very blessed to be endorsed by the Republican Party of King County, but also counties in my district. The largest county in my district, Benton County, just endorsed me on Thursday. Friday, the major opponent that I'm running against is from Yakima. I got 57% of the Republican Party support, in Yakima on Friday. That should tell you something. Their support was so limited that they could not even get a motion to endorse. So it's pretty amazing. So I'm leading in the polls by wide margins. The other candidates are going to come out against me. You know they are in June and July. I just need to be able to hold my ground, okay? So I've got a couple things, gifts that I brought for you. We've got some hats inside. Make a contribution to my campaign. I have a best-selling book called How We Broke America that I define how the government and our political people have sort of broken us over the last 250 years. What are some of the things that have gone wrong in our nation? For example, the 16th and 17th Amendment. How are those hurting us? It's a big deal that a lot of people don't think about. 1913 was a very, very bad year for America. So I'm happy to sign a copy of that for you. My campaign slogan is, I'll protect your wallet. When I was, a few years ago, a chiropractor got me to move my wallet from my back pocket to my front because it was messing up my hip. And I started buying wallets, and they all sucked, okay? They're just terrible. I had 5 of them, so I finally designed a wallet. Again, I'm an engineer, right? So Italian leather, soft. It's a Jerrod Sessler branded wallet. You can get a copy of that wallet or one of those wallets. I have them for you. I have a whole bunch more in my truck if you want some. Make a good contribution to my campaign. We'll get you one of those. Lisa Razak is here. She's helping with fundraising on my campaign. Thank you, Lisa. She's amazing. Yeah, let me just close with this. Yeah, we have 10 congressional districts, 10 congressmen in Washington State, right? Not right now, 8 of those are held by Democrats. The 4th is Central Washington. The 5th is up against Idaho. That's Michael Baumgartner. It's very similar to Catherine McMorris Rodgers in terms of his voting record so far in his history. I am the sole strong voice that will fight for us and will defend us. We need a voice in this state to rescue our state. We need somebody that is going to stand in the gap and is going to be that voice. I have no hesitation, as you have witnessed tonight, to speak the truth, and I will do it for you, and I appreciate your help for my campaign. Thank you very much.
So, very quickly, I know the day's getting long. I think this has just been a great discussion, and I just had a couple of quick thoughts on closing out. One was obviously voter integrity. January 6th is not over. It's front and center of the national dialogue right now. I think we need to be calling our representatives, putting pressure wherever we can. Maybe our representatives might be a lost cause at the moment in our area of the state, but we can still put pressure on people in other states. Number 2, we need to be the adults in the room. So we play by the rules. We don't break the rules. I know, coming from a J6 person, right? But I became very good friends with my parole officers. I thanked them when they were done. I said, I know you didn't sign up for this kind of baloney of being, running political prisoners. They're used to running drug runners and stuff like that. So, I was thankful. I was respectful. We got along. We need to be, my family drew closer to God, and we were either going to pull together or fly apart. We pulled together. I learned compassion from this thing. I had 200 hours of community service that the judge gave me. And, the first, I was picking up trash out on the streets from the homeless people up in Everett. And the first 100 hours, I was pissed, and I was kind of hating on everyone around me. Not verbally, but in the back of my brain, I was resentful. And then it kind of dawned on me, like, hey, these people's lives, these are real people. There's a lot of pain out there. And so I learned compassion for my fellow man. So it changed my life. There's good stuff that came out of this. The kid who turned me in, I had resentments against that person. 4 years later, he ended up writing me a very sincere apology letter. and actually made reparations for some of my legal fees and stuff like that. Help pay for, I'd raided my kids' college fund to stay out of jail so that my business wouldn't go under, so that other people wouldn't lose their jobs as well. So there's been reconciliation between the families. There's good things that could come out of this. And another point, a lot of our freedoms have been eroded. Precedence has been set, and it was a really bad precedent that got set. But that's the way our law works in this country. We work off a precedent. And so if they can do it to me, they can do it to John, they can do it to us, they can do it to you. And in fact, they will be doing it to you if things keep on going the way they're going. And so that's why we're here. We're standing up. We want to stop that precedent. We want to claw some of those freedoms back, because it's a bit of a facade. You think you've got more freedom than you do, and then in the end, like what John said before, it's like, in the end, it's like there's power. There's raw power, and you don't necessarily have that freedom when you're in handcuffs. And you may be right, but if the judge sees it a different way, because if the judge is scared, he doesn't want to see my video. My attorney said, you can fight this, it's going to cost you $250,000, or you're going to do jail time, or you can just say you're sorry. So there's been a lot of erosion of freedoms, right? I'll just leave it at that. And then the last point I wanted to say is, as a country, we need to wise up and stop being so gullible. Stop listening to the people that have lied to you before. Like, if you just, think of any news agency, if they've lied to you before, just like if you had a wife or a husband that was lying to you about something, you're going to start taking what they say with a grain of salt. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but as a country, we need to do that. If you've been lied to by somebody, take what they say with a grain of salt, and then remind your people that are in your circle the same thing, because maybe they still believe you. So those are my points. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stay seated. So one of the mantras I kept having in the back of my mind as I went through everything I went through was, the best revenge is a life well lived. And one of the other things that I recognized too, and I didn't get to touch on this, but when you go through the judicial process, people fought and died to give us rights, and the way that a bar association has set up the court system is you waive every one of those rights the moment you need them the most. You waive the right to speak, you waive your right to association, you waive your right to a counsel of your choosing and a counsel of their choice and approval. And when I fired my attorney and the judge wouldn't let him go, my defense attorney who had been practicing private defense law, never been a public defender, when the judge made him fly from Seattle to DC to sit next to me in my trial when I represented myself, he said, I never knew what it meant to be an officer of the court. He works for the court, right? Even your defense attorney that you're paying works for the court, which is why you get crazy plea deals. Just go in and say you're sorry, right? Even though you know you're right. What is going on there? You waive your right to privacy. You waive your right to a speedy trial. Don't waive your rights. Take your licks up front, right? There's a reason our founding fathers put a speedy trial in the Constitution. Why does it take thousands of days to put on a trial? The attorneys convince the defendants that it's better for you. The reality is the prosecution spends all that time building the case. If they had it, they'd be ready for trial the day they indict you. Force them to put you on trial in 70 days. It can make all the difference in the world. Represent yourself, right? You can have a standby counsel that'll tell you how to do it, but speak for yourself, because then you can confront your accuser. You're not allowed to confront your accuser in the judicial system. I had the officers that I allegedly assaulted on the stand in front of a jury, and I said, did I hurt, harm, injure, or threaten you in any way? The definition of assault, and they said no. My defense attorney I say my defense attorney, standby counsel, he about fell off his chair. He's like, I wouldn't be allowed to ask that question. But you have a constitutional protection to confront your accuser, and the judicial system prevents you from doing that. The claim was essentially dropped right there, and had it been any normal trial, the judge would go, well, that was good, I can go home now, right? So stand on your rights, take your licks up front, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. While I was incarcerated, my wife saw our challenges. We had 5 kids at home, all in outdoor activities. We're a homeschool family. And she started a nonprofit to help kids with incarcerated parents, because going through that, she realized this is a big problem. Statistically, 1 in 28 children in America right now today have an incarcerated parent. And of children, by the time they turned 18, 1 in 14 will experience an incarcerated parent in that time frame. So in every class in America, there's on average at least one kid that has an incarcerated parent, and they're prison orphans. And so she started a nonprofit to help them with dance and things like that. Currently, it's helping 140 kids. So, you know, I always think of Genesis chapter 50, where God says, I'll take what is meant for evil and I'll turn it to good, right? January 6th is a blight on our nation's history, but we could also look back at it someday like we look back at the Tea Party, and it was some excellent thing that changed the course of history. And I know a lot of other J6ers are out doing some incredible things trying to make the world a better place. And a lot of it is because the government ripped us out of our safety zone. You know, I'd still be running a septic business installing shitters, right, if it weren't for January 6th. But now I have a little bit more influence, and I'm able to help people kind of see the reality of where we're at. I consider myself someone who speaks on behalf of the peasant, the tradesmen, the people who are just out there going to work. You know, when I talk to people about 9/11, most of the people in my circles are like, yeah, what did I do? Well, I just went to work. I saw what happened, and I went and started wiring up a house and running plumbing, because guess what? You know what tradesmen know? Life has to go on, right? And the job's got to get done. And we, the people, the job's going to get done, right? It's just how much pain is it going to take us up front? So take our licks up front. Go get involved politically. Oh, look, Democrats want to redistrict? Great, we're there for it. We're not going to, you know, foot around this thing or skirt around or work with limited resources. Just go head on into these problems. And one of the things I found out going through prison is the biggest bullies are the weakest people. And when you actually go right up to them and you can survive that first punch, you've got their number. You know, they're going to throw everything they can at you up front. Like, I just think of that all the time. So be involved. Don't be afraid of these people. They rely on you and your virtue to castrate yourself, right? They want you to come in and try to play nice. You don't you always play nice, right? But you don't have to be intimidated by them. That's the thing that, and trust me, these judges and stuff, a lot of them are just go at them, man. Just do it. The worst thing that can happen is the thing that's already going to happen. At least if you take action, something might be different, right? The fate changes when you actually confront something. So that's it. Thank you. Peasant's Perspective, I stream Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to about 8:30 a.m. It's a daily show, and
What's your wife?
Okay, so the Peasant's Perspective, you can find it on all the audio players as well. It's a little green man revolution thing, and my wife's nonprofit is called Left Behind and Without at leftbehindandwithout.org. So check it out.
I have a book that's being published, Dad Defending Democracy, and you can go to daddefendingdemocracy.com and pre-order.
Well, I'm not a politician, but I'm a wife, a mother, my husband of 46 years back there. We homeschooled 4 children 34 years ago, and when I was running for school board, that all came out, disqualified me for school board because I homeschooled my children. The insanity in the world is crazy. I could talk off the cuff for 3 hours here, but I am going to stick to my script, just like our pastor did in his prayer. I'm running for state representative against Roger Goodman. Nobody else was running against him. There would only be a Democrat to vote for, so I put my name in with the help of King County GOP. I believe the people of Washington deserve leaders who will defend transparency, accountability, constitutional rights, no matter which party is in power. They're going way off the Constitution with everything. Over the last several years, our country has become more divided than ever. Americans have lost trust in institutions, in elections, in the media, and even in each other. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or somewhere in between, I believe we all want the same thing, a government that's honest, transparent, and accountable to the people. January 6th remains one of the most controversial and emotional moments in modern American history. I can just feel the emotions. You guys, I can't even, in American history. Many Americans saw it differently. that watch CNN, but one thing is clear, millions of citizens felt ignored, dismissed, and unheard. I believe we need more truth, more transparency, and less political weaponization from every side. I do not support violence or lawlessness. I support peaceful civic engagement, equal justice under the law, and the protection of constitutional freedoms, including free speech, due process, and the right to question our government without the fear of being silenced or labeled. I'm running because working families are struggling while politicians argue. We need leaders who will focus on safer communities, stronger schools, affordable living, election confidence, and restoring trust between citizens and government. This campaign is about faith, family, freedom, and the belief that ordinary people still matter. I'm not running for power. I'm running to represent the people who feel forgotten, to ask hard questions, and to fight for a government that serves the public instead of itself. So I'm here to ask for all of your support and all of your money.
Oh, girl.
You can donate online, vote JoAnn, no E at the end, JoAnn, votejoann.com, or my website, or there's envelopes out there. But I just appreciate you all for coming and give these guys a hand.
Well, I think it's fair. We'll probably, all the speakers up here will probably be available if you want to come up and chat with them later on. I know many of the people here in the audience, and a lot of you guys know me, so I appreciate being invited here to be the MC. And like I said, I mean, but you know, for the grace of God go I would have been arrested along with these guys. I expect to get arrested usually, most of the time, so that would have been not an unusual concern of mine. But I do want to point out, and I think it's important, elections are absolutely critical, and some of you know I have the Washington Voter Research Project, the doorbelling work that we did, and there is a lot of endless, thankless work that goes on in trying to deal with the election system and the importance of cleaning it up. And J6 was not the first event that's been around elections in our country. If any of you have ever gone back and say the Colfax, they called the Colfax Massacre in the Reconstruction South, where a lot of Republicans were killed trying to get access to the ballots. So this has happened before in our country. It is important and generational to fix it. And if you think that the other side is all powerful, you're not paying attention, because they're panicking right now. Power, money, and control requires money, and it requires them to have control, and they feel like they're losing all of that right now. So you're going to see crazy stuff sometimes come out, but that's not the time to hide. That's the time to stand up and confront. So thank you guys so much, and John, thank you for helping get this thing organized, and feel free to come up and chat with these guys. And like I said, close all my videos. The future belongs to those who show up, and I should have said regularly, but it's just you got to stick with it. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, bye. Yes.
I have some material for you.
Okay.
Now I'm kind of stuck. I don't know if he wants me to keep videoing this stuff for me. It's on. If you really need to watch it, it's a very cutting. Well, you show me just to do this. There are some Democrats because of the way they took the data.
They're all my friends.
Well, and you're lucky. How do you like being trapped?
Oh, you know, that is such a weird... I've gotten hit almost 2 or 3 times by now on that thing.
The real trouble.
I mean, part of me is like, you know, if people understood it, it's slick, but people don't understand it. Is that video? Oh, you know what? I was going to ask Glenn. We need a Spencer Pratt. That's what we need. I have him on X. I mean, he's out there. I just think, and I was talking to my friend, I go, we need to spend some credit. It needs to come from the left. I mean, I don't
people kneel in the front, maybe.
Right now.
Hey, Joe, what are you doing in the back?
Anyway, well, you're stuck there. But we'll have to catch up. I am now fully back to the. Oh, so great.